Hey everyone, and welcome back to our 5-minute Bible study. Today we are talking about Genesis chapter 44. We're kind of in the middle of a story here, so let me remind you what happened in chapter 43. Joseph's brothers came down to Egypt, and they had had a rough run-in with Joseph in Egypt. They didn't recognize Joseph when they met him after they sold him into slavery about 20 years earlier, but Joseph recognized them, and he's kind of testing them to see if their character has changed at all in the past 20 years. So that's where we're picking up. In the end of chapter 43, Joseph invited his brothers into his home, and they ate together and they had a good time. Now they're about to depart Egypt and go back to Canaan as we pick up in 44. So let's talk about our dates. When did these events happen? Joseph was sold into Egypt as a slave by his brothers when he was 17 years old. He became the ruler, or the second most powerful man in Egypt, when he was 30 years old. And then this is at least 7 years after that, because you remember, God revealed to Pharaoh that there was going to be 7 years of abundance and then 7 years of famine. Well, the 7 years of abundance have passed, and now we're in the famine period. So this is at least 20 years after Joseph was sold into Egypt. Who are our main characters going to be in this chapter? Well, we've already met all of them. Joseph is the first one. He was the son of Jacob and Rachel, and he was the favorite son of his father. That is until he disappeared because his brothers sold him as a slave and didn't tell their father. Joseph's 11 brothers are the next character, a group of characters in this chapter. In chapter 42, 10 of his brothers had come down to Egypt, and in chapter 43, all 11 of them came, including Joseph's youngest brother, Benjamin. The geography and map for this chapter are pretty much the same as they've been for the last several chapters. Jacob and his sons lived in Canaan, and they had to go southwest to the land of Egypt, where Joseph ruled in order to buy food during the famine. Now, as we enter into our outline, I think what we're going to see here, as I mentioned, was Joseph testing the character of his brothers to see if they've changed. So our first section, verses 1 through 13, Joseph's silver cup goes missing. So after his brothers had been in his house and they had eaten together, Joseph told his servant to fill his brothers' sacks with food and to put their money back in their sacks and to send them on their way. But he told him to secretly put his own silver cup in Benjamin's sack. At first light the next day, the brothers got up, they loaded their donkeys up, and they made their way back to Canaan, and at least begun their journey. But they didn't make it very far, because not long after they departed, Joseph told his steward to go and to chase down his brothers and to confront them about stealing his silver cup. The steward caught up with them. He asked them why they had returned Joseph's kindness with evil and stolen his cup, and they said, we didn't steal his cup, and they denied it, and they even went so far as to say that the one who had the cup would be killed if he could find it, and all the others would become Joseph's servants, because they were very confident that they hadn't done it. Well, the steward proceeded to search all of their bags, started with the oldest brother and ended with the youngest brother, Benjamin, and right when they thought that they were going to get off without any trouble, the cup was found in Benjamin's sack, and the brothers were distraught, and they tore their clothes, and they turned their donkeys around and returned back to Egypt. And then in the last 20 verses, verses 14 through 34, Judah offers himself as a substitute for Benjamin. The brothers were brought back to Joseph's house. He asked them why they had taken his things, and he told them that Benjamin was going to have to stay in Egypt as his slave. Judah, one of the oldest brothers, approached Joseph and pleaded with him. He explained their situation. He explained his father's love for Benjamin, and he told Joseph if they returned without Benjamin, their father was going to die of heartbreak. And because it was Judah who had promised to keep Benjamin safe, Judah then offered himself as a substitute for Benjamin. Judah said, I will stay in Egypt and be your slave if you let Benjamin return to my father. And so we have this cliffhanger situation as we end Genesis chapter 44. Now let's talk about our application and talk about Judah a little bit more, who we talked about in the application from the last chapter. If you haven't looked at that one's a good place to start, and then jump over to this application. In Judah, we see a shadow of what Jesus did for us. I don't think it's a coincidence that Jesus is a descendant of Judah. In Judah, we see a sinful man who sacrificially offered himself as a substitute for his brother. In Jesus, we see a sinless man who sacrificially offered himself as a substitute for his brothers. And according to Mark chapter 3, verse 34 and 35, in Hebrews chapter 2, those who are obedient to the will of God, who follow the words of Christ, are called Christ's brothers and sisters. So Judah kind of gives us a shadow of something better that is to come, a salvation for all humanity. He gives it to us in this picture of him trying to save his brother. And this is just one of many shadows that we'll see of the true Savior coming down the line as Jacob's family develops into the nation of Israel, and then the Savior is born from those people.